بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. The topic that we started on was regarding the era of peace. So there was after all of the battles, all the major wars, and the Malhama, and Dajjal, and Isa, and Yajuj, and Majuj, then there'll be an era of peace. And it mentions here regarding the era of peace, such an era which is never ever seen before in history. And then you find the followers of Isa alayhi salam that will only be left. They will eventually stay there for a few years, and then there will be a southerly kind of wind coming, and then killing all of the Muslims in a peaceful manner. And then there'll be completely fasad on this earth again. And that's where I got to. And then I mentioned last time round regarding the verses of Surah Isra regarding the coming of the Bani Israel again, and the two eras of where the two periods of power for the Bani Israel. And I mentioned this because of how relevant it was in the times that we're living and what we're seeing in the Middle East now, that they will have certain two periods of time. And I mentioned the mainstream view is that those two periods that the Bani Israel will be in charge of Masjid al-Aqsa and its surrounding areas have already happened, and those are the recipients of those ayats of the Quran is something which is of the Bani Israel and not the Muslims. This is the mainstream view which has happened in the past. But the modern scholars have now kind of interpreted it slightly differently, and they've said that there's one more time going to come where the Bani Israel will be in charge, and then something bad will happen. And then the addressees of these verses of the Quran is actually towards the Muslims, meaning, oh Muslims, you will be in charge of this masjid, and then something will happen, they'll be taken over, and then something. So example, if I was to give you the ayat which is ayat number 7, where if I was to say, oh Muslims, if you do good, then you do good for your own benefit, and if you do evil, then it will be against you. And when the second promise and era comes again, O Muslims, another group will cause your faces to become sour. Meaning, O Muslims, another group will come and causes humiliation, which we've been seeing for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And they shall enter the masjid. So it doesn't say temple, it's like Temple of Solomon, no, it says the masjid. So this is the masjid, meaning Muslims will be there. Just like they entered the previous time, and then they will destroy everything inside of it. What will they destroy? Meaning everything which is Masjid al-Aqsa as well. So this is the prophecy, and some scholars have mentioned that this is going to happen. Oh Muslims, be aware. So this was it. Then I wanted to mention regarding a certain prediction, and this is regarding the prediction of the red cows. So I mentioned this yesterday as well. What is the red cows, and what is the significance in regarding the lands of Palestine and its surrounding areas, and how will that play a part in the coming and the signs of the Day of Judgment. So the Jews, the Bani Israel, they have a certain belief. They have this certain belief, and they believe in that. When the actual Jewish tradition is that they have something called ceremonial impurity, najasa, impurity, ceremonial kind of impurity. And this is why if you look at history and look at where the Wailing Wall is, so you look at the Wailing Wall is such where, if you look at the compound of Masjid al-Aqsa, you have the Dome of the Rock which is there, and the head of it Masjid al-Umar, and there's 5 masjids inside of this Masjid al-Aqsa. This whole compound is Masjid al-Aqsa, and inside of the compound of Masjid al-Aqsa there's 5 masjids. And at the top right hand corner of the Masjid al-Aqsa there's the Wailing Wall, and the other side of that is where the Jews come, and then they will start to go, and then they put messages in the wall, and they start to do their worship where this Wailing Wall is. And you find that the ratio of Jews coming to the Wailing Wall compared to Muslims in the masjid is a huge difference. And one of the reasons what they have said is that because they're impure, they cannot go towards that Wailing Wall. They have certain impurity, and they cannot go towards that certain wall because they're impure. How do they get this impurity, and why they're impure, ceremonially impure and najasa? is because every time they touch a dead person, they become impure. They touch a dead person, they become impure. So, like example, they go to a janazah and then they touch the dead or something like this, and they become impure. And what happens is, if you've seen somebody who's touched a dead person, then they become impure because you've touched them. So now it goes along. So this is the Jewish belief, that is ceremonially you are impure and you have this najasa. So how do you remove this impurity? So the Jews believe in a certain way. Because there is this red haifa, so a cow, I'm just going to mention red cow. There's a type of cow which is called the haifa, and there's a certain breed and so forth. I'm just going to call it the red cow for ease sake. So this red cow must be sacrificed. So this is what they believe. The red cow must be sacrificed. And the ashes, so once they sacrifice it, they burn it, and then the ashes. And the ashes now spread around upon the person or something, or they touch it, and then they become pure afterwards. Once this happens, then they become pure. They become cleansed. So they've been searching for this red cow for ages. And throughout history, they've found a few red cows. And once they found this red cow, they're searching and say, yes, we've got it. Then they found this one little black spot or this one little black hair on it. They said, no, it's not the red cow that we wanted. And they discard it. And they've had quite a few over a period and generations they've been trying to. Some have mentioned only 5 they've tried to find and they couldn't find. Now, recently, they've found 4 or 5 red cows. Fully red, meaning that full everything is there and they're fully red cows. And they found it in Texas, I believe. Where is it? Yes, I think they found it in Texas. So in America, they found these red cows and they've checked it and they've observed it, and they've actually, this is last year or 2 years ago, they've transported it. They bought it like for $100,000 per cow or something, and they've transported it all the way to the lands, Israel. And they've actually got an organization set up to find these red cows. They've got organizations to find these red cows. So they found it, and then they have certain conditions as well. Amongst the conditions of the cow is that it's never worn a collar before, it's never mated before, and it's got like so many different kind of conditions. So whatever the conditions, leave all the conditions. There's just a certain type of cow, and they found a certain type of cow. And not just one, they said, look, we found 5, just for extra, in case something happens. So they send it all the way to Israel, and what will happen is that the one slaughtering it has to be very clean and pure, like a priest, or let's call them a rabbi because it's the Jews. So a rabbi, and this rabbi has to be clean and a very high level, and it has to be like a very high level, a kind of learned kind of rabbi, a very pure rabbi, a very clean rabbi, cleansed rabbi. All of these things have to happen, and he has to slaughter it. Once he slaughters it, then he sacrifices, then they burn it and they have the ashes. Once they have the ashes, then they spread the ashes around. And this is the important part that I wanted to mention. And then everyone becomes cleansed because of this. Now they become pure. Now they can go back to the holy lands again. So they have a massive ceremony for this sacrifice of this red cow. And this is where everyone will come, all the Jews around the whole world, /Zionist, whatever you want to call them, and they'll come around the whole world to have this ceremony. And this ceremony will now lead towards the destruction, or because of their celebration, they'll go and destroy everything that will see in sight. And what will happen is that they will accidentally, in brackets, open brackets, destroy everything inside of Masjid al-Aqsa because of their joy and so forth. And this is what's on, this is what this is what their belief system is. That this will happen, we found one, and we're going to do it very soon. We're going to do this very soon, and this is what's going to happen, and they'll destroy the buildings in Masjid al-Aqsa and its surrounding areas, and then they will build their temple after everything has been destroyed. And this is where the verse comes in. كَمَا دَخَلُوهُ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. Masjid, they enter the masjid just like the first time. وَيَتَبِّرُوا مَا عَلَوْا تَتْبِيرًا. And they'll destroy all of his buildings around. So all of the buildings around, they've already destroyed most of the buildings around anyway, but any buildings that are around, they'll destroy it, and all the buildings inside Masjid al-Aqsa, they'll also destroy it as well. So these are, I wanted to mention regarding these red cows. So these red cows is the belief of the Jews. It's not our belief, but it's the belief of the Jews. And they said they found it out of the 5 they found last year or 2 years ago. I believe 1 has been discarded already, I'm not sure, but they still got 4, and they said that this is the conditions. Apparently all of them have passed the conditions, and they're just waiting to have this ceremony and then do this, and then it will eventually lead towards them taking over Masjid al-Aqsa. This is their belief system, and they want to do it as quickly as possible. And he mentions here that this will happen at the beginning time of the era of Dajjal as well. So that's why it's linked towards this program. I wanted to mention that because it's linked towards the era of Dajjal, and it's linked towards the era of where all these things will happen. Lots of movement is happening. Lots of movement is happening regarding the Mahdi. Lots of movement is happening regarding the system of Dajjal before actual Dajjal comes. And they'll be doing this so they can speed up the process of their Messiah. Their Messiah meaning Dajjal. They think that their Messiah is like someone good. No, their Messiah is Dajjal. And then they'll be doing it on his so they can speed up the process of Dajjal coming. This is what they believe. And they've tried to do it in the past and it hasn't happened and it hasn't worked. And they believe that this is the one and so forth. So number one is that why am I mentioning this? Number one, to equip ourselves with the facts of the history of Bani Israel. And I mention here Bani Israel. Why? Because Israel comes as a name. I'll go back towards a bit of history. And this history mentions regarding, let's say, Ibrahim alayhi salam. Let's go back to Ibrahim alayhi salam. So all the major three religions in the world that you have Judaism, Christianity, and you have Islam. So all of them are linked towards Ibrahim alayhi salam. All are Abrahamic religions. Ibrahim alayhi salam was born in which area? Where was he born? Iraq. So in the Ur is the city, Iraq is the area. So Iraq is the. So remember that you have Ibrahim alayhi salam moving towards the Holy Lands. He's moving towards the Palestinian area, Canaan. So they moved there. Who was there from before? Was it barren land? No one there. There was people there, right? Indigenous people of Palestine were there. There were indigenous people of Palestine there. So once they went all the way there, Ibrahim alayhi salam obviously settled down. Who did he go with? He went with his wife, and he went with his nephew, which was, anyone know his nephew? Lut alayhi salam. Thank you. Lut, another prophet. So Lut alayhi salam. So obviously that's when everything started. And once he moved there, and then he got his family, and then the sons of Ibrahim alayhi salam are two, yeah? Only two, yeah? Ishaq alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. Two. Good. Ismail alayhi salam is where you find the progeny of Arabs. Yeah? And Ishaq alayhi salam. So Ishaq alayhi salam, Isaac, Ishaq alayhi salam is there. Ishaq alayhi salam also marries and he has children. And what's his children's name? Huh? Thank you. Yaqub. So Yaqub alayhi salam. So you have Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub's other name is Israel. So you have Bani Israel coming from Bani Yaqub. Okay, so this is where the Israel comes. So where was Israel actually from? His grandfather was from Iraq. Yeah, he's come from Iraq. He didn't come from Palestine. He came from Iraq. So the ones who are Bani Israel, we say Bani Israel, right? But they're actually the forefathers. Allah mentions in the Quran, وَمَا أُنزِلَتِ التَّوْرَاةُ وَالْإِنْجِيلُ إِلَّا مِنْ بَعْدِ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. He mentions here, مَا كَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ يَهُودِيًّا وَلَا نَصْرَانِيًّا وَلَكِنْ كَانَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا. Ibrahim wasn't a Yahudi, wasn't a Nasrani, he wasn't a Christian, wasn't a Jew. But he's Hanifan Muslima. But their actual progeny actually doesn't come from Palestine. They had indigenous people there from before, and then they came from Iraq. They came from Iraq and they moved the war and then they settled down there and so forth. So you find this, and then you find history coming, and the history was now when the Babylonian people came in and they took over the place and they destroyed Masjid al-Aqsa and so forth. And then you had other people coming and then certain other armies coming in and taking over. The Romans also came and took over. So we're mentioning regarding this ayats of the Quran regarding the entering of Masjid al-Aqsa and so forth. And this is what happened from before. So the Bani Israel, Allah mentions them, but Bani Israel again and again, but they weren't indigenous to those areas. So they can't claim to be those areas. Rather, you had indigenous Palestinians there from before. Canaanites. They were there also, and they're there from before, and they were there after as well. So when the Jews got expelled, the indigenous Palestinians were still there as well. And eventually those people actually became Muslims. Bani Israel became Muslims, and they were Muslims as well after that as well. So you find the people in that time, we had the Jews, and the Jews also got taken to different places. But the Jews living in Muslim lands were treated completely different. The Jews in the Muslim lands, and there's a whole lectures given on this, how the Jews were actually treated in Muslim lands. They were taken and kicked out of Spain. They were kicked out of different places all around. And when you're kicked out of different places, then the Muslims took them in. The Ottomans took them in. They say, we'll take you in. Oh, Jews, come, you take me in. You've got knowledge. You're Ahlul Kitab. Allah mentions Ahlul Kitab. You're from the Ahlul Kitab. Come on. And then they had the ability to practice their own religion in their own places of worship and so for the synagogues. So the way they were treated as something which is different to anybody else which is coming inside of the lands, like the other groups. And they got people got kicked out. So I wanted to mention that if you were to take a test in those Palestinian areas, and you look at most of them, they'll be actual they'll be going back towards the Bani Israel, meaning they'll think. But if you'll find those people coming from different areas of Europe, coming into those lands, which has been happening now, huge migration towards Palestine and the occupied areas, those areas, if you take a DNA test, then their DNA test won't go back towards Arab roots. Where would they go towards? European. They go to European, isn't it? Because they all came from here. And that's why it's banned to take a DNA test in the area. Because they know. It's banned to take a DNA test in those areas, because they know. That's why I mentioned this prediction from them side regarding the red cows. So I mentioned these red cows for a reason, and these ayats of the Quran that I mentioned regarding وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, just wanted to try and equip you with some history. And it's very important to know that the word anti-Semite and the word Semite comes from where? Semite is those people living in the Arab lands. They say these are Semites. So to say anti-Semite is against anti-Arabs. So now they've just attached this towards that certain group. And they're saying that it's this certain group and that. So I want to try and equip you. It's very important for all of us to equip ourselves with facts of history. So in your workplaces, amongst your friends and so forth, you can actually tell them, this is not anti-Semitic. We're not saying things which is anti-Semitic. This is wrong. That's been something else. One is anti-Zionist, which we all are, but not anti-Semitic. We're not against Jews. Jews lived in our Muslim lands, and they had the ability to do many different things. So giving yourself knowledge is very important. It gives you self-confidence. So when you have confidence in your religion and confidence in what you're talking about, then it makes it much easier to try and put your point across. So always equip yourself with the truth, with haqq. وَجَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ. And this is what we want to do. We want to equip ourselves, the Muslims, as what is the truth. Well, I'm just talking about history. I'm talking about prediction which they have mentioned and history. So to say that whatever I'm saying is anti-Semitic is obviously incorrect, because all I'm mentioning is something which is history and what they have mentioned, and what's happening now. So this knowledge gives us a little confidence. So in your school, your colleges, universities, in your workplaces, now you know that when you're speaking, the truth will come out, because you know it's regarding history and so forth. And this is what we want to try and do: equip ourselves with the right knowledge, equip ourselves with something which is the haqq, the truth. And now you have confidence in your knowledge. And this is why we say that I mentioned a few days ago regarding knowledge and how knowledge will be lifted up from this earth. The Quran will be lifted up from this earth. La ilaha illallah will be lifted up from this earth, and no one will be saying La ilaha illallah. So before that time comes, we want to try and build our knowledge, be confident in our knowledge, know what we're talking about. And once a person knows what he's talking about, then the truth will start to come out. And now people will start to know exactly what is what, and then to try and say something else is a person will start to back away, because now you have the knowledge, now you're going to be having the upper hand, and now you feel much more confident in your deen and confident in what you are saying as well. And this will now slowly, once you speak the truth, what will happen? All the batil will start to go away. So keep speaking the truth, and this is what we want. But equip yourself with facts, with knowledge, with the correct knowledge, with beneficial knowledge. And once you have this, inshallah, then you find that your whole groups and the people around your own echo chambers, all of these people will start to fill themselves up with the truth, and then they'll know exactly what's right and what's wrong, and then they can make their own judgments accordingly. So this is important to try and have this knowledge. It gives us our confidence and our children confidence, what's right and what's wrong, and then we know what to say and what not to say as well. We know what to say, what not to say, and we can challenge those things which is batil, because we know which is haqq. So this is important to try and equip ourselves with those things. This is the advice that I give, and this is why I wanted to mention these ayats of the Quran and how it's linked towards the different groups and how everything is there. And I did mention everything, all the signs of the Day of Judgment regarding, and I'll mention this in the coming days as well, inshallah, the different aspects of the signs of the Day of Judgment. That's not finished. Inshallah, in the next few days we'll try and finish them. There's only a few left, and they'll be quite quick, one after another, and then we'll finish them, inshallah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability to act on what's been said. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the correct beneficent knowledge. And for those times that are going to come, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us be amongst the people of the truth and the people of successful. And for those people who are suffering nowadays, Ya Allah, grant them any peace and humility and peace and serenity. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them victory. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them acceptance of their shuhada and the status of becoming martyrs. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it such that now the Muslims will have the upper hand in just like we have وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant the victory towards all the Muslims and help those Palestinians in those areas, inshaAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for acceptance of all our du'as and actions. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanallah bihamdi. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah, if everyone can make their way to the tent, inshallah, and not to waste any water or food, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
चाय भी जो है ना कारपेट पे थ्रो करते हैं बड़ी